Imagine standing in a darkened chamber, the iron spikes of the breast ripper glowing red from the fire. You already know the horror this device inflicted, tearing away at women's bodies under the guise of justice. But here's the question history rarely asks: what happened after? The scars didn't end at the skin. The breast ripper left behind shattered lives, silent resistance, and memories so disturbing that entire cultures tried to erase them. This is part 2 of our look at the breast ripper, not the mechanics of the torture itself, but the long shadows it cast across societies from medieval Europe to beyond. The first thing to understand is the aftermath. In court records from Germany and France, women subjected to the ripper weren't always executed. Some survived, maimed and disfigured, left as living reminders of both punishment and shame. For many, their bodies became a public spectacle even after the torture. Survivors were often cast out by families, branded as dishonored women, their injuries twisted into proof of guilt rather than of cruelty. And yet, most of the time, the very act of survival became its own form of resistance. Whispered stories tell of women who returned from this ordeal, refusing to stay silent, warning others of the cruelty of inquisitors and magistrates. While their voices were rarely recorded in official documents, echoes remain. Fragments in folk songs, local legends, and even in the fear-filled whispers of later witch trials. The silence of the archives is not proof of absence, it's proof of censorship. Women's suffering was deliberately erased to protect the authority of those who inflicted it. But this method of terror wasn't confined to Europe alone. Punishments eerily similar to the breast ripper surface across the world. In colonial Brazil, enslaved women faced iron devices designed to mutilate breasts as warnings against rebellion. In the Caribbean, punishments targeting female bodies were used to destroy not just individuals, but the very possibility of lineage and cultural continuity. Across these geographies, we see the same pattern: the body of the woman made into a battlefield, where power proved itself through mutilation. Even in North Africa and the Ottoman Empire, records show variations of iron claws and heated pincers used in cases of adultery or supposed sexual transgressions. The chilling reality: wherever patriarchal systems feared women's independence, they devised tools to control and terrify, and the breast ripper became one of the most extreme symbols of that fear. And yet, despite its reach, you won't find the breast ripper in most museums today. Torture museums often display racks, thumbscrews, or the infamous Iron Maiden, but the breast ripper is strangely absent. Why? Because it forces us to confront something even darker than generic cruelty: the targeted, gendered violence meant specifically to humiliate women. A rack can be displayed as a general symbol of medieval punishment, but the ripper tells a story of misogyny. Its absence is itself a kind of censorship, a way of hiding the uncomfortable truth that women's suffering was central to how justice operated. This silence continues in historical education records. When students learn about medieval Europe, they hear about knights, castles, and battles, rarely about the tools used to police women's bodies and souls. The breast ripper remains hidden in the margins, left out of mainstream narratives because it challenges the romanticized image of chivalry and Christian morality. But here's where cultural memory gets interesting. In some regions, symbols of clawed iron or fiery pincers entered folklore as metaphors of punishment from beyond the grave. Stories of witches tormented by flaming claws after death, or of demons tearing at the breasts of the sinful, may have originated from the very real practices of inquisitors. It's as if society transformed unspeakable history into myth, not to preserve it faithfully, but to bury the truth under allegory. Still, pieces of resistance survive. In 16th century German woodcuts, women accused of heresy are sometimes shown standing defiantly, even as their breasts are attacked by demonic figures. Contemporary viewer, it's moral propaganda, but to us today, these images can also be read as unintended testimony that women endured, that they stood firm even in the face of unimaginable cruelty. The modern symbolism of the breast ripper is perhaps the most haunting of all. In feminist art and scholarship, it has resurfaced as a metaphor for the policing of women's bodies. Just as the device left permanent scars, so too have laws taboos, and violence work to control women through fear and shame. The Ripper becomes not just an artifact of the past, but a lens through which we can examine ongoing struggles over bodily autonomy. Think of the debates today about control over women's health, sexuality, or even clothing. The specifics are different, but the underlying logic is disturbingly familiar. Punish women who step outside accepted norms, and do it in ways that make their suffering a warning to others. The breast ripper may not be in use, but the mentality that created it has never fully disappeared. And this raises a question. Why do we remember some instruments of torture vividly, but let others fade into obscurity? Part of the answer lies in discomfort. Devices like the rack or the guillotine can be studied as neutral technologies of punishment, but the breast ripper forces us to confront the intersection of cruelty and gender, the deliberate targeting of women's most intimate identities. It makes history too personal, too raw, yet that's exactly why we must remember it. To erase it from museums, textbooks, and conversations is to erase the women whose lives were destroyed by it. Remembering the breast ripper isn't about dwelling on gore. It's about honoring those silenced voices and recognizing patterns of violence that still echo today. So when we talk about torture in the Renaissance or the Inquisition, we can't just catalog devices like curiosities. We need to ask who was targeted and why. The breast ripper reminds us that cruelty wasn't random. It was structured, deliberate, and designed to uphold power. By confronting this uncomfortable truth, we resist the same silence that once buried these stories, and perhaps that is the final act of resistance, refusing to let history hide its darkest chapters. If you found this exploration valuable, consider supporting us by subscribing to the channel and sharing this video. The more we uncover these hidden histories, the harder it becomes for them to be forgotten again.